In this penultimate study of the Song of Songs, we consider together chapter 8 verses 1 to 14. In the New International Version that we've been using together, it reads, "If only you were to me like a brother who was nursed at my mother's breasts. Then if I found you outside, I would kiss you and no one would despise me. I would lead you and bring you to my mother's house, she who has taught me. I would give you spiced wine to drink, the nectar of my pomegranates. His left arm is under my head and his right arm embraces me. Daughter of Jerusalem, I charge you, do not arouse or awaken love until it so desires." Who is this coming up from the wilderness, leaning on her beloved? "Under the apple tree I roused you. There your mother conceived you. There she who was in labour gave you birth. Place me like a seal over your heart, like a seal on your arm, for love is as strong as death, its jealousy unyielding as the grave. It burns like blazing fire, like a mighty flame. Many waters cannot quench love, rivers cannot sweep it away. If one were to give all the wealth of one's house for love, it would be utterly scorned. We have a little sister, and her breasts are not yet grown. What shall we do for our sister on the day she is spoken for? If she is a wall, we will build towers of silver on her. If she is a door, we will enclose her with panels of cedar. I am a wall, and my breasts are like towers. Thus I have become in his eyes like one bringing contentment. Solomon had a vineyard in Baal Hamon. He let out his vineyard to tenants. Each was to bring for its fruit 1,000 shekels of silver. But my own vineyard is mine to give. The 1,000 shekels are for you, Solomon, and 200 are for those who tend its fruit. You who dwell in gardens with friends in attendance, let me hear your voice. Come away, my beloved, and be like a gazelle or like a young stag on the spice-laden mountains." The final chapter of the Song of Songs stands apart from all that has preceded it. Earlier, the various songs or poems have been of a reasonable length and relatively self-contained. With the present chapter, we are introduced to what seems like a kaleidoscope of short extracts from a range of poems. Moreover, while it's been possible to place the earlier songs on an imagined timeline from courtship to early married life, the time references in this chapter seem to jump all over the place. And yet, for all the apparent chaos, this is the chapter that is most explicitly reflective and implicitly given to providing an insight into human sexuality. In this way, the Song of Songs fulfills its role within the wisdom texts of the Old Testament, directing its hearers or readership to discover life as it is to be lived under the blessing of God, and to reveal this God and his presence within our human lives. The first couple of verses appear to take us back to a time before anything else so far described in the book took place. Here we are introduced to the young girl when the first springs of loving desire were experienced. So she longs for a situation and time when she can meet with her young man in a context that is both intimate and socially respectable. Verse 3 reminds us that this occasion was eventually met, and the repetition of her words to the bridesmaids or attendants as she prepared for her wedding in chapters 3 and verse 15 hints at the occasion in which her longings found their fulfillment. The language she uses of the young man is also significant. He is brother and lover. He is family and friend. It is within this relationship that she recognizes her longings will find their profoundest fulfillment, that she will enjoy life to the full. Verses 5 to 7 retransport us from the early springs of love to a time many years later. In chapter 3, the arrival of the groom is described as accompanied by a marriage train. Here, however, the two lovers, perhaps to be envisaged returning from a second honeymoon, have only themselves as company. The reference to the woman leaning on her husband may be a reflection of her loving devotion and dependence on him, and vice versa. It may also imply that she needs support as her creaking elderly joints render her shaky on her feet. in this one image a picture of love that has deepened as years have passed and infirmities and difficulties have increased, is awesomely beautiful. It is one of the most moving verses in the song. Then, as is so often the way with older people, they revisit and reminisce about the places that have shaped their lives, especially their lives together. In particular, they go back to her parental home, where their love for one another first blossomed. This prompts them to reaffirm their devotion to one another, perhaps conscious that as the years passed, so their parting from one another nears. But if death is the grim reaper which bears us all away in its powerful grasp, love itself is equal to it. It too is powerful in its indestructibility. The reference to waters in verse 7 is probably a sidelong look at the mythology of the ancient world, where the powers of chaos and darkness, all that opposed God, were depicted as oceanic convulsions. Neither death nor any power can, in the view of the poem, touch true love, and hence, while sex can be bought, the love of this couple is priceless. At which point in verses 8 and 9 we are again teleported here back to the time when the young woman has not reached puberty. The general point is clear. Her brothers express with force that they hope to affirm at her marriage her virginity. Years later the young woman replies, relishing her figure, and why not? She affirms that she came to her husband a virgin. However, to what does she refer when she says that she was, to quote the New International Version, as like one bringing contentment? At its most basic reference, it may imply that she was able to satisfy her husband, that she had kept herself only for him. Yet the word used is the Hebrew word shalom, which again conveys much, much more, as we noticed in an earlier study. It's an eschatological word. It refers to life lived in the fullness of all that God intended it to be. It refers to that life which is our eternal hope. In the meeting of bodies, yes, and in the union of two personalities, she's brought her husband into an experience that transcends any other earthly experience and even anticipates heaven itself. What a contrast to the experience of Solomon as described in verses 11 and 12. For reasons of political expediency he had many wives, and for reasons of sexual fulfillment he had many other women described elsewhere as concubines. In his court, sex was a matter of political expediency, a financial transaction, or the fulfillment of physical lust. However, the bride indicates she's not one to be traded or bought. Her vineyard is one that she will freely make available, but only to the one she loves. Briefly and tantalizingly, the song ends with two short comments by the man and the woman in verses 13 and 14. Perhaps we may imagine that she's enjoyed a night out with her girlfriends, but her husband longs for the sound of her voice as she returns home. She, for her part, is happy on her return to renew her tryst with her husband, because it is he she wants more than any other. It is tempting to locate these two verses at the time alluded to in verses 5 to 7. Their bodies have become lined and fragile. They still, however, find delight in one another's embrace. The old fire may not burn so brightly, but its heat is still even more present, because overcoming love is the furnace in which it glows. The woman may need some help with the buttons, or he with his zips, but they still find delight in one another. At which point abruptly the song ends. While we might like to have learned some more, yet in another respect nothing more can be said. True love endures all the vicissitudes of time and place. Mutual enjoyment and physical union eclipse every other human experience, and do so as part of God's design in making us in his image. In the lifelong and mutual self-giving of a man and a woman, God is himself glimpsed, and his nature imprinted within us.